And joining our program right now is Dr. Aziz, head of ADB's Office of Regional Economic Integration. Welcome, Professor.
Okay.
All right. Professor Iwan, how would the rising inflation affect ASEAN economic growth?
Well, if the question is the effect of inflation on economic growth, as far as Asian economies are concerned, the short answer is not that much. I think what can happen is that if the policy response to the higher inflation are too tight or sort of restricting growth, then it may have the effect on the growth. But the higher inflation itself, the effect on growth will not be that much.
Mm-hmm. Right. So would this also have the impact on the global economy as for the Europe and the U.S. debt crisis problem?
Now, that is more serious problem because at least there are three channels how the situation in Europe and the U.S. may affect the Asian economies. The first channel is through what I call the portfolio effect, and that is something to do with the weakening of the U.S. dollar. If the U.S. dollars continue to weaken, and as far as the weakening of U.S. dollar is concerned, I think it's going to happen. But now the question is by how much. But if that is the case, then for some of the Asian countries which hold a lot of foreign reserve in U.S. dollars, they will definitely lose their portfolio composition in the foreign reserves. So that is one effect on what's happening in Washington on the Asian economies. Now, the second effect is through the exchange rate. Because of the weakening of the exchange rate, that may affect the trade, because if the U.S. dollar is weakening, that means many of the currencies in East Asia, or including ASEAN, because many of the ASEAN countries are still pairing the local currency with U.S. dollar, will be strengthening. And that is also bad news for the export. So that means export-oriented economies, including Thailand, for example, will be damaged. The competitiveness will be damaged if the U.S. dollar continues to slide. The third channel is also affecting export, but this is more on the quantity side. If the impasse continue in Washington, meaning that there is no good resolutions on the problems of the debt ceiling and the fiscal deficit, then it will eventually hit the U.S. economy. So if the growth rate of the U.S. economy is declining, that means the demand for goods, including goods from ASEAN countries, will also be affected. So from any angle you look at it, if the outcome of the problems in the U.S. is not favorable, meaning that there is no good resolutions, especially between the Democrats and the Republicans, then it will impact not only the U.S. economy, but also the rest of the world, including ASEAN economies.
Right.
Right. Professor, so how should Asian governments and investors prepare for this?
Okay, as far as trade is concerned, it is already happening, actually. The increased interaction among Asian countries. For example, the increased trade among ASEAN has been increasing, actually. So if we look at the trade pattern in the region, so far, as far as the intermediate goods is concerned, the trade within Asia are quite strong. But as far as the final goods is concerned, most of the export of final goods from Asia are going to the third market, and that is the U.S. and Europe. Now, with the collapse of Lehman in 2008, which led to the global financial crisis, and that led to the slowing down of the U.S. economy, plus problems in Europe, that market can no longer be relied entirely. So in other words, Asian economies have to start looking for alternative markets for their final goods.
Right.
And one of the alternative markets is within Asia itself. That's why I predict that the intra-Asian trades will increase in the coming years.
Right. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Sure.